Hey, today I'm doing my third part of my response to Jonny Scholar Progenium's video about advice for new tournament players. This is advice for middling tournament players who wants to get better. So, and I'm doing this again, homage to Jonny. I'm going to fiddle around with tanks because that's what he does. So, Jonny made the final bit. What was that? Game winning. Right. How to win games. That was his overall his final point. He had 3 points. Like he had preparation, he had mindset, and then winning games. So, how do you win games when you go to tournaments? He made a point about not being lazy with, and that's always a good advice, not being like casual and be precise. I would add to that, be precise, especially with your declarations. His was something about having the right mindset and not like, I don't care, whatever, reserves, I don't, whatever. Not having that mindset of not caring about what happens in the game. I think I would add that you need to be very precise when you want to win games, and you need to have a game plan going into the game, and you need to stick to that plan, because that will overcome your laziness. That will overcome your tendency, especially in game 5 or 6, to just not be able to care anymore about this game because you played so much and you're basically done. But if you're very precise in your declarations and in sticking to your game plan, that will help. Also, he made comments about risks and when to take risks and when not to take risks. And again, this is something that comes with experience and experimenting. For me, I would always advise against risks. Right? You should always play the odds. For me, when I start taking risks in a game, I know the game is going horribly badly. I've already decided that this game is almost certainly lost. And then I will start taking risks, because then, I need to do something to try and pull this out of the... Yeah. So if I take risks against you, it's because I'm losing. I'm famous for this. I play conservatively. I don't take risks, but I do play aggressively. I know when to push, and that is something that comes with experience. That is when you can see the enemy, when you've set it up right, then you know the enemy is weakened for a turn, they're pinned or whatever, they've lost a couple of units, and you know they're open. Then you push. Then you take his units. Then you kill that one unit that you know it's been isolated for ever so long. One of the things that I see a lot of inexperienced players and regular players as well, not veteran players, but newer players and people who go to tournaments quite often, is right, I move one unit up and shoot something and I miss. They will then respond shooting the unit that's just gone. They don't need to do that. You can wait until the end of the turn, do the last thing, because I've already moved. I can't do anything now. I'm stuck there, right? So that is the difference between a regular player and a veteran player. A veteran player will know, I'll get you later in the turn. Just wait. I'll see what else pops up first. And that's something about making a mental list about what needs to happen when. So that mental list, and that is something that comes with playing quite a lot of games. That mental list, and playing your list for quite a lot of games. So play the odds and have that list going on. Jonny also said, discuss the terrain. That's always good advice, by the way, for any and all players, because and you'll know that in every game it'll always come up. There's always like one piece of terrain that you forgot to talk about, and then you're gonna have to decide in the middle of the game, and it might be game winning or game breaking for some people, and it sucks. So it's always good advice. Talk all the things you can. Talk all the pieces of terrain again through that you can. It's always good. By the way, this is a perfectly scaled Daimler Dingo from where is it from? Georgie. It's a Georgie miniature, so it can actually roll across the table. It's kind of cool. I've got 2 of these. Never really used them in anger. I've used them at a couple of friendly games, but never in a tournament. They're not that good. Only a light LMG. And then JP came up with a comment. If your opponent is down, crush him. I'm not sure I agree with that. Veteran players know when to push your opponent into the dirt. And yes, in a tournament, quite often, kill points is the thing that will decide the game. And you really shouldn't give your opponent the opportunity to get back in the game. But there is quite a lot of games and quite a lot to be said for I'm ahead, I sit back and let you come to me. Because in bolt action, quite often, the person that moves is the person that loses. So if you're attacking, if you're the first one that pushes, then you're the one that loses. I did a little bit of stats on this for World Open War. And at World Open War, with the Danish team, it was quite clear that the active player was the player that lost most games, which sucks, by the way. It's not how I would wish version 3 was, but that was what happened. So we shall see if more terrain on tables or whatever, if that changes up stuff. We'll see it with more data in. But I think you should be very, very careful about when to attack and when to just sit back and defend. Because if you're ahead and you're sitting back, then your opponent has to come to you and they will make mistakes. So that's always good. If you know you're winning, think about it. Do I want to sit back? Don't just headlessly rush him because you got him on the back foot. Don't just headlessly rush at him and kill stuff. Because going into Bloodlust is basically always a mistake. Yeah. Jonny also talked about how to choose sides. For me, I always want a side that has a nice deployment zone. Somewhere where I can hide. And I always want a table that has quite a lot of line of sight blockers. I like line of sight blockers on my tables. As you've seen some of the commenters say in some of the videos where I set up a table, well, you've got too much terrain. Yeah, I've got a lot of terrain. I think that's the way the game should be played. And I like having terrain on my tables. Quite a lot of it. So yeah, that's the thing. I completely agree. I am a little biased towards more terrain, especially line of sight blockers. I like line of sight blockers because they enable maneuvers, and I like maneuvers in the game. I really do. So which side do you choose? I will typically take the one where I have some nice line of sight blockers that cover my deployment and where I can see a way forward. Right? That combination is one of the things that I do. And me and Jonny and JP, we talked quite a lot about choosing sides and about which side and which deployment zone you want, and thinking about how the game is going to develop a few turns ahead. And that's something that comes with experience. It is. So he talks about, I have my notes here, imagining the maneuvers, just what I said, right? Imagining which way I'm going to move up. It's always good to just have an idea in your head. I can move behind that terrain and just visualize where you want the game to be, which also informs where you put objectives, which Jonny also said. Jonny also said that you should always match your opponents when you place your objectives, sort of mirror him. Yes and no. you should decide what benefits your army. Yes, most of the time it is a good idea to mirror your opponent. If you don't mirror your opponent, if you load up one side and you're betting on rolling that initial and getting that side, then you're gambling. Then you're not playing bold action. You're just gambling, right? But I have seen players do it, especially if they're up against armies or players that they don't think they can win against. They'll, take a chance, because now it's a 50-50 chance instead of a 70-30 chance that they'll lose. They take the 50-50 chance. Better odds, but still gambling. But there are some armies where you want the objectives to be spread out. There are some armies where you want the objectives to be close together. There are some armies where you want the objectives to be towards the sides. And there are some armies where you want them to be in the deployment zones. So also, and this is the veteran part, right? Think about what your army wants of the objectives and think about what your opponent's army wants for the objectives, and then decide where the objectives go. Right. What about deployment? How do you deploy? That's the next thing that Jonny covered. And I think one of the really important things about, and this, by the way, is my Humbers. They're still being painted. I love those for V3, right? Humber is just an awesome car for V3 because it's got that light autocannon and it's got recce and it's armored and it's close topped. It's perfect. Right. How do you deploy? Do you counter deploy? A little bit, but what you typically should not do is plonk down your units one at a time. So you have your opponents put down one unit, you counter it with one unit that can see that unit, so that you're ready to shoot it turn one. Nah, that's hardly ever a good idea. Make a plan instead, and then have your units deployed so that they're in position to, in turn 2 and 3, counter your opponent. That's where the really good stuff goes in. And the really good players will know where you're going to be in turn 2 or 3 or 4, and then they'll outflank that position. That is awesome when that happens. I am really bad at outflanking. I'm really bad at figuring out where the opponent is going to be and then being on the right flank. And I'm also really bad at figuring out where the opponent is going to outflank me. I'm not good at that. I'm really not. But I always have a plan with my deployment. So I don't counter deploy. I don't put down my units where I wouldn't put this Humber where it could see an enemy unit unless I knew that there was nothing that could threaten this Humber. And that's the only thing. And also that the Humber had an exit from that position, right? If I just plug it down somewhere where it can't move, then that Humber is lost. As soon as I kill that one unit that I wanted to counter deploy, I lose the Humber because it can't move. So I'm always looking at where can these vehicles and where do they need to go so that they can influence the rest of the game. That's what I'm looking for. Influencing the rest of the game, not just turn 1. Yeah. And then Jonny makes a comment about reading the opponent's list. I've already talked about this. Don't set up your units in danger. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't have one I could show you here, right? But I all through V2, I played with my artillery observers. Now I'm using, in almost every single list I'm setting up, I am using light mortars. Now light mortars are very vulnerable, right? My UFO list has 8 of these. Very, very vulnerable units. It's really, really important that I set them up in cover, behind line of sight blocking cover, or in hard cover where they could go down and have a 2+ cover save. Otherwise, my opponent will be lured into counter deploying and will try and kill my units turn 1, which I don't want. So don't put your units down in danger always a good thing. I always try to sort of put my units in positions where turn 2 or 3 I can focus my force on one part of battlefield. And this is a little bit tricky because I also want to spread out enough that my opponent's multi-rocket launchers, air observers, and forward artillery observers can't really influence me that much, and that he is uncertain of where I want to go. Because that mental game of him not knowing, am I going to push left or right or the center, that I like. That's good because it will make him deploy wrong. Especially like fixed artillery pieces and such. They'll be deployed to counter one of them, and then I'll go the other way. Which I love having that heavy howitzer sit there and do nothing all game. It's the best feeling. But the only way you can do that is by having the idea that I have this maneuver I want to do. I want to push that way, and I don't want to be in danger from my opponent. So you set up way in your own back line with some pieces. You set up behind line of sight blockers, and then you move out turn 2, turn 3, turn 1 maybe even. Once you know where the opponent is going and you're safe, then you move, right? So play conservatively. Yeah. Final thing that Jonny mentioned is when to push. And that's a difficult one because it depends. But he said that you should do it late game, and there is something to be said for that. But in V3 you have sticky objectives, and sticky objectives is, oh, they're a weird one, aren't they? Sticky objectives. Oh. Sticky objectives. Sometimes I think with sticky objectives you might even want to do that early so that the opponent has to come up and take the objectives and you can just defend them. It is a little bit risky, but at least have some units that can go late and just grab the objectives, right? So when to push depends on your army, depends on your opponent's army. So just saying late game, early game, that's too simple. You need to get a feel for the game, you need to get a feel for the lists before you can say that. And that, I think, is my final bit of advice on a finishing off with a horse-drawn carriage. Yeah, that was it from me. That was my response to Scholar Progenium. Thank you, Jonny and JP, for the input and the ideas that float around in my head once I see your videos. Hope to talk to you in the next New Year's, after New Year's. Right, see you all next video. Cheers.